Quinn Redfield checked his gold watch as the Rolls-Royce glided toward the country estate where his childhood friend's wedding would take place. The familiar knot of dread tightened in his stomach, not because he resented Jason's happiness, but because attending solo meant facing the inevitable questions about his own perpetual bachelorhood despite his 32 years and billion-dollar shipping empire. "We've arrived, sir," his driver announced, pulling Quinn from his thoughts. The sprawling Tudor-style mansion loomed ahead, its manicured gardens already filled with guests in summer finery. Quinn straightened his custom Tom Ford tuxedo and exhaled slowly. 10 years since he'd seen most of these people former classmates and neighbors from the modest suburb where he'd grown up before building Red Ocean shipping from nothing. "Thank you, Martin. I'll call when I'm ready to leave." Quinn strode across the gravel drive, nodding at a few vaguely familiar faces. The wedding coordinator checked his name and directed him to the ceremony area, a flower-adorned pavilion overlooking a lake. "Quinn, you actually came." Jason Miller, the groom and Quinn's oldest friend, rushed over with a wide grin. "I promised, didn't I?" Quinn returned the smile, accepting Jason's bear hug. "Wouldn't miss it." "Man, how long has it been? 4 years since my parents' anniversary party. You look expensive." Jason laughed, gesturing at Quinn's perfect tailoring. Quinn shrugged. "Business is good. More importantly, you're getting married. How are you holding up?" "Nervous as hell, but ready. Megan's amazing. I still can't believe she said yes." They chatted easily, slipping back into the comfortable rapport of their youth. Jason had become a high school physics teacher, the same school they'd attended together. His life had followed a predictable, respectable path, while Quinn had thrown himself into creating a global empire. "Oh, Quinn, you remember Liana Campbell, right? From senior year English?" Quinn turned and his practiced smile froze. Standing before him in a pale blue bridesmaid dress was a woman he'd never forgotten. Liana Campbell, the brilliant, quiet girl who'd sat beside him in Mrs. Patterson's class, whose insightful analysis of literature had always impressed him, whose kind smile had gotten him through some of his darkest days after his father's death. They'd been friendly but never quite friends, orbiting different social circles despite his secret admiration. Liana. Quinn found his voice. It's wonderful to see you again." She looked different, her formerly long brown hair now cut in a sophisticated bob that framed her face perfectly, highlighting cheekbones that had always been there, but somehow seemed more defined now. Her eyes, though those were exactly as he remembered, deep brown with flecks of gold, intelligent and warm. "Quinn Redfield." Liana smiled, and something in his chest constricted. "The shipping magnate himself. I've seen your face in Forbes." "Don't inflate his ego more than necessary," Jason joked, then glanced over his shoulder as someone called his name. "Duty calls. Wedding in 30 minutes, Quinn. Liana's escorting you to your seat. Catch up with you both later." As Jason hurried away, Quinn found himself alone with Liana, suddenly aware of how his palms had gone slightly damp. "So," she said, "shall we get you seated? I believe you're in the front row with the family." "Lead the way," Quinn replied, falling into step beside her. "You look beautiful, by the way. That color suits you." "Thank you. Megan actually let us choose our own styles as long as we kept to this shade of blue. A considerate bride." Always was a considerate person. Jason chose well. Quinn paused. "Are you still in the area?" "I'm afraid I've lost touch with almost everyone. I moved back 2 years ago. I'm running the local library now, renovating it, actually. We just received a grant to modernize the children's section." Quinn remembered her passion for books, how she'd always had one tucked under her arm. "That sounds perfect for you. You always did have a book recommendation for everyone, including you." Her eyes twinkled. "You were the only football player who ever asked me about Hemingway." They reached his assigned seat, and Quinn was surprised to feel a pang of disappointment. "Thank you for the escort, Miss Campbell. Liana, please. We're not in high school anymore." She adjusted a flower on his lapel that had tilted. "I should check on Megan. Save me a dance at the reception. Absolutely." As she walked away, Quinn realized he was smiling genuinely for the first time in months. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. Quinn watched his childhood friend commit to the woman he loved, and for the first time in years, he felt a hollow ache in his chest. He'd achieved everything he'd set out to do professionally, but personally, his penthouse apartment was empty, his social calendar filled with business functions rather than genuine connections. At the reception, Quinn made polite conversation with former neighbors and classmates, many of whom seemed overly interested in his wealth. He answered questions about Red Ocean shipping with practiced ease, describing how he'd built it from a single cargo vessel into an international fleet, but his eyes kept searching the room for Liana. He found her by the bar, momentarily alone as she waited for a drink. "I believe I was promised a dance," Quinn said, approaching her. Liana turned, and her smile seemed to brighten. "I believe you were, though I should warn you, I've had exactly one dance lesson, and it was for this wedding. I'll take my chances." He offered his hand just as the band shifted to a slower melody. On the dance floor, Quinn was acutely aware of the light pressure of her hand in his, the subtle scent of her perfume, something with notes of vanilla and amber. "So," she said as they moved to the music, "Jason tells me you're quite the business success story, shipping mogul by 30. 31, actually, not that I'm counting." He guided her through a turn. "It's been a lot of work, but worth it. I remember how determined you were even in high school, always talking about seeing the world, building something meaningful." Quinn was surprised. "You remember that? We sat next to each other for a year, Quinn. We talked more than you might recall." He had always assumed she'd barely noticed him beyond their classroom discussions. "I remember you were the one person who didn't look at me with pity after my dad died." Liana's expression softened. "Because I knew what it was like. My mom had passed the year before." "I didn't know that," Quinn said quietly. "I kept it pretty private, but I recognized that look in your eyes. That's why I kept lending you books. They were my escape, and I thought they might help you too." Quinn felt a rush of warmth as a memory surfaced. The old man and the sea. "You insisted I read it, and you returned it with notes in the margins that made me see it completely differently." Her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "You had depth, Quinn Redfield, even at 17. The song ended, but neither moved to separate. "Would it be terribly forward to ask for another dance?" Quinn found himself saying. "Not at all, though people might talk." "Let them." He led her into the next dance, this one slightly more upbeat. "So tell me about this library renovation. What's your vision for it?" As Liana described her plans to create a modern community space while preserving the historic character of the building, Quinn was captivated by her enthusiasm. She spoke with her hands, occasionally apologizing when she missed a step in the dance because she was too caught up in explaining her ideas. "I'm sorry," she laughed after nearly stepping on his foot. "I get carried away talking about the library. Don't apologize." "It's refreshing to hear someone passionate about their work," says the billionaire who revolutionized shipping logistics. "Ah, you've done your research. Maybe a little Google stalking before the wedding," she admitted with a slight blush. "Your company's sustainability initiatives are impressive." "That's my current focus," Quinn nodded, "making the industry more environmentally responsible while still being profitable. A challenge, I imagine. Worth it, though, like your library project." The evening progressed, and Quinn found himself spending most of it with Liana. They shared drinks, swapped stories about their lives since high school, and danced several more times. He learned she'd been briefly married in her 20s to her college boyfriend, divorced amicably when they realized they wanted different futures. She'd earned a master's in library science, worked in Boston for several years before returning to her hometown when the director position opened. As the reception wound down, Quinn realized he wasn't ready for the night to end. "Would you?" he started just as she said. "I was wondering." They both laughed. "You first," Quinn offered. "I was just wondering if you'd like to get coffee sometime while you're in town." Quinn felt an unfamiliar flutter of anticipation. "I'd like that very much, though I should mention I'm not just in town for the wedding. I've actually purchased property here, the old Whitman estate. I'm renovating it as a second home." Liana's eyebrows rose. "Really? That's practically adjacent to the library grounds." "Is it?" Quinn feigned surprise, though he'd been well aware of this fact when he'd bought the property 6 months earlier. He'd told himself it was a sound investment, a place to escape the pressures of New York. He hadn't acknowledged, even to himself, that some part of him had always felt drawn back to his hometown. "Small world," Liana said with a knowing look that suggested she didn't entirely believe his innocent act. They exchanged phone numbers and Quinn called his driver. "Can I offer you a ride home?" "Thank you, but I'm staying at Megan's parents' house with the other bridesmaids tonight. Bachelor party cleanup duty tomorrow." "Of course." He hesitated, then leaned in and kissed her cheek gently. "It was wonderful reconnecting with you, Liana." Her skin flushed slightly under his touch. "Likewise, Quinn, I'll hold you to that coffee." 3 days later, Quinn sat across from Liana at the town's oldest cafe, a charming place with original tin ceilings and locally roasted coffee. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, her hair slightly tousled from the breeze, and Quinn thought she looked even more beautiful than she had in her bridesmaid dress. "So," she stirred her latte, "what made you decide to buy property here? I imagine you could have a vacation home anywhere." Quinn considered the question. "Honestly, I've been feeling disconnected lately. Success is isolating in ways I never anticipated. Everyone wants something from you, and it's hard to know who to trust." "And here?" Liana asked softly. "Here I'm still just Quinn, the kid who played football and lost his dad too young. There's something grounding about that." Their coffee date stretched to lunch, then a walk through the town square where they'd both spent countless teenage afternoons. "The theater's still showing classic films on Thursdays," Liana pointed out as they passed the Art Deco movie house. "They're screening Casablanca next week. Would you like to go?" Quinn found himself asking. "With me, I mean." Her smile was answer enough. Over the next 2 weeks, Quinn extended his stay in town, ostensibly to oversee renovations on his new property, but primarily to see more of Liana. They attended the Casablanca screening, where Quinn was delighted to discover Liana knew every famous line. They had dinner at the lakeside restaurant where their high school had held proms. Quinn toured the library, impressed by Liana's vision for its transformation. "The budget's tight, but we're making it work," she explained as they walked through the children's section, where worn carpeting and outdated shelving awaited upgrades. Quinn studied the space, mind already calculating. "Have you considered moving that wall to open up the space? You could create a reading nook with that bay window." "In my dreams," Liana laughed. "That would add at least $50,000 to the project, which is well beyond our grant." Quinn said nothing but filed the information away. Their time together felt effortless. Quinn found himself sharing things he rarely discussed: his insecurities about his rapid rise, the pressure he felt to continually prove himself, his fears about his mother's declining health. Liana listened without judgment, offering perspective that often shifted his thinking. In turn, she told him about her divorce, her struggle to balance ambition with contentment, her desire to make the library a center for community connection in an increasingly digital world. "I worry it's not enough sometimes," she confessed one evening as they walked along the lake. "You're changing global shipping practices, and I'm just running a small town library." Quinn stopped walking and turned to face her. "Never say just about what you do. You're preserving something essential, a space where people can discover worlds beyond their own, where kids can develop a love of learning, where community happens face to face. That matters, Liana. It matters enormously." The moonlight silvered her features as she looked up at him, and Quinn couldn't resist any longer. He leaned down and kissed her, gently at first, then with growing certainty as she responded, her arms sliding around his neck. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the wedding." "Only since then," Liana teased. "I've wanted you to do that since Mrs. Patterson's class." Quinn pulled back in surprise. "What?" "You had a crush on me in high school," Liana's laugh echoed across the water. "Quinn, half the girls did. You were smart, thoughtful, and looked like that, but you never seemed to notice any of us that way." "I noticed you," Quinn admitted. "I just never thought. You were so focused, so certain of your path. I was still figuring out who I wanted to be after my dad died. And now, her eyes held his, questioning, now I know exactly who I want to be, someone worthy of a second chance with you. Their relationship deepened over the following weeks. Quinn extended his stay indefinitely, working remotely and flying to New York only when absolutely necessary. His renovation project accelerated, with crews working double shifts to complete the transformation of the historic property. But as summer waned, reality began to intrude. Quinn's business demanded more attention, a potential acquisition in Singapore, regulatory challenges in Europe. Liana's library project faced setbacks when structural issues were discovered during initial construction. "It's going to delay everything by at least 2 months," she told Quinn over dinner at his temporary rental apartment. "And the cost overruns mean scaling back some of the improvements." "What if I helped?" Quinn offered. "I could know." Liana's response was immediate and firm. "Quinn, I care about you deeply, but I need to do this myself. It's important to me." "I understand," he said, though part of him didn't. Money had become his solution to most problems, and having it dismissed felt strange. "I respect that." 2 days later, a mysterious donation arrived at the library board enough to cover the shortfall and complete the project as originally envisioned, plus add the reading nook Quinn had suggested. The donor insisted on anonymity. When Liana mentioned it over the phone that evening, her voice brimming with excitement, Quinn feigned surprise while suppressing a smile. But their relationship faced a greater test the following week when Quinn received an urgent call from his COO. "I have to go to Singapore," he told Liana that night as they sat on the patio of his rental. "The acquisition is at a critical stage. I'll be gone at least 2 weeks." "Of course you should go," she said, though he detected disappointment in her voice. "Your business needs you." "Come with me," Quinn suggested impulsively. "Singapore is incredible, the architecture, the food, the gardens. You'd love it." Liana's expression shifted. "Quinn, I can't just drop everything and fly across the world. The library renovation is at a crucial stage too. You could take a vacation." 2 weeks? That's not the point. She stood, pacing the patio. "This is your world, private jets and international business and spontaneous global travel. It's not mine." "It could be," Quinn said quietly, "if you wanted it to be." "And what happens to my life, my career?" "The community I'm building here," she shook her head. "I'm not interested in being a billionaire's girlfriend who jets around the world but has no purpose of her own." The words stung. "That's not what I'm asking for, isn't it?" "Because it sounds like you expect me to fit into your life rather than considering how you might fit into mine." They argued late into the night, exposing the fundamental tension between their worlds. Quinn left for Singapore the next day with things unresolved, a hollow feeling in his chest that not even his private jet's luxuries could fill. In Singapore, Quinn threw himself into work, negotiating the acquisition with characteristic precision while trying to ignore the ache of Liana's absence. They texted daily but kept conversation light, both avoiding the deeper issues they'd raised. During a rare free afternoon, Quinn found himself wandering through the city's botanical gardens, stopping before a display of orchids. He remembered Liana mentioning they were her favorite flower, how she'd always wanted to see Singapore's famous national orchid garden. Taking a photo of a particularly striking purple bloom, he sent it to her with the simple message, "Thinking of you." Her response came hours later, "Beautiful. Missing you too." That night, unable to sleep despite exhaustion, Quinn stood at his hotel suite window overlooking the glittering city. His reflection stared back at him, successful, wealthy, and completely alone. The realization hit him with sudden clarity. He'd built an empire but no real home. He'd accumulated wealth but few genuine connections. And now, when he'd finally found someone who truly saw him for who he was beyond his billions, he was risking losing her because he couldn't step outside the parameters of the life he'd constructed. Quinn made a decision then, one that would alter the course of his carefully planned existence. The acquisition took 3 weeks instead of 2. When Quinn finally returned to the States, he didn't go to New York but flew directly to his hometown. It was early evening when he arrived at the library, which was still open for another hour. He found Liana in her office, surrounded by blueprints and material samples, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up when he knocked on her open door, surprise and something else, hope, perhaps flashing across her face. "You're back," she said, rising from her chair. "I am." Quinn stepped into the office, suddenly uncertain of his welcome. "I wanted to see you first thing." "I thought you'd be in New York." "New York can wait." He took a deep breath. "Liana, these past weeks gave me a lot of time to think about what I want, about who I want to be." She crossed her arms protectively. "And what did you conclude?" "That I've been building the wrong thing all these years." He moved closer to her desk. "I created Red Ocean because I wanted security after losing my father, because I wanted to prove I could succeed on my own, and I did. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to build a life worth living alongside that success." Quinn reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, setting it on her desk. Liana's eyes widened. "This isn't what you think," he said quickly. "Open it." Inside was not a ring but a key. "It's to my house here the renovation's finished. But more than that, it represents a commitment. I've restructured my executive team, brought in a COO who can handle daily operations. I'll still need to travel sometimes, but I'm making this place my primary home." "Quinn, please, let me finish." "I'm not asking you to give up anything, Liana. I'm offering to build something with you, something that honors both our worlds. I've established a foundation that will fund library initiatives across the country, and I'd like you to consider directing it if that interests you. If not, I'll support whatever path you choose." He took her hands in his. "I love you, Liana. I think part of me has loved you since we were 17 and you handed me Hemingway when everyone else was handling me with kid gloves. You see me not the billionaire, not the business titan, just me. And I see you, your passion, your brilliance, your heart. I don't want to lose that again." Tears shimmered in Liana's eyes. "You really restructured your entire company for this, for us, for a chance at real happiness, for balance." Quinn smiled gently. "What good is all this success if I can't share it with someone who matters?" "I love you too," she whispered, moving around the desk to stand before him. "I missed you so much it scared me. I've been independent for so long, I forgot what it feels like to want someone in my life this way." "So where do we go from here?" Quinn asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Forward, together." Liana reached up, pulling him down for a kiss that promised everything. 6 months later, the newly renovated library held its grand reopening. Quinn stood proudly beside Liana as she cut the ribbon, the community cheering as the doors opened to reveal the transformed space. The children's section, with its reading nook overlooking the gardens, was an immediate hit, as was the new technology center that would offer free classes to residents. That evening, Quinn hosted a celebration at his home, now their home, as Liana had moved in 3 months earlier. Friends gathered in the garden, including Jason and Megan, who had just announced they were expecting their first child. "To new beginnings," Quinn proposed a toast, his arm around Liana's waist, "and to finding what matters most." Later, as their guests departed, and they stood alone in the garden under a canopy of stars, Quinn knelt before Liana with a different box than he had presented at the library, this one containing a vintage emerald ring he'd found in an antique shop in Singapore. "Liana Campbell, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because either of us needs the other to be complete, but because together we're better versions of ourselves." "Yes," she answered without hesitation, tears of joy spilling onto her cheeks. 1,000 times yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Quinn marveled at the journey that had brought him back to his hometown and to the woman he'd admired since youth. His billions had built him an empire, but it was Liana who had shown him how to build a life one founded on love, purpose, and genuine connection. And that, he knew with absolute certainty, was his greatest achievement yet.